All right, Jabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Menachem Ab, the Tilson and Wall families of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Shir Drashos this month, sending the love from Eretz Yisrael and Amir Hashem inviting us to come and join the B'Sha'at Tov Mitzlachas. Our week of learning sponsors, Nathan and Beth Adler, in memory of Benjamin Adler Achover, Baruch Mordechai ben Moreno Rav Nassan Zichron Livracha, in the schos of Sergeant Amit Friedman, who was Moser Nefesh for Am Yisrael, for Eretz Yisrael. May his neshama have an aliyah, family in Nechama, and Meretz Hashem in the schos of all of our hostages. May Chadash Baruch Hu continue to return them to their families b'shalom and b'karov, and the schos of our precious soldiers, may they have hatzlacha b'chol ma'aseh yadehem. But with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Samech Daled 64. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Samech Gimel days 63b. 2 lines up from the bottom. So just to reorient ourselves a little bit, we spent the bulk of yesterday focusing on the position of Rav Dimi. Now Rav Dimi came along, Rav Dimi said that if you sell a home to someone and you don't say the lashon of mitahom ara va'adrom rakia. So ultimately, again, they do not acquire, let's say the bar or the dus, the different things like that. If you just say kavaroma from the heights and depths, just simply means again that they acquire that which is above the house, they acquire that which is below the house. But if you want someone to really acquire everything on the property, including the bar, the dus, which we'll get into more today, you have to use this specific lashon, the specific verbiage of mitahom ara, from the depths of the land, vadrom rakia, into the heights, ultimately again of the sky. So says the Gemara Tashmas. Let's analyze this a little bit more. So remember again, we saw in our Mishnah that the Mishnah discussed the idea that if I'm selling a home, so by definition, the roof of the home is excluded at a time that the roof has a fence of 10 tfachim or higher. Right, that by definition, the roofed area is excluded. So I'll say top of Samach Dal 64a, now, kind of what the Gemara worked out a little bit is that stam, when you go out and you sell a home, so what's included in the home? Kavaroma. What's included in the home is what's above the house and what's below the house. What's not stam included in the sale of a home? Pits, water cisterns, things like that. So if we automatically assume that in the sale of a home is included kavaroma, that which is above and that which is below, so then I don't understand why is a fenced-in rooftop excluded? It should be automatically included in every single sale. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Gemara says, Kevan de Gava, 64a, 3 lines down, Kevan de Gava, Sarat Fachim, Chashiv. Now the rooftop is different, because a rooftop that has a fence of 10 Tfachim is really considered to be a domain unto itself. And because it's considered to be a domain unto itself, therefore by definition, it is excluded from the sale unless otherwise included. Okay. So Ravina says Ravashi as follows. Tashma, let's analyze. Damar Reish Lakish, Zos Omeres, Hamocher Bayis Lechaver Va'amar La'amanas Shediuta Alyona Sheli. So listen to this. So Reish Lakish said, based on what we've learned, if a person goes ahead and sells a home to his friend, and he said, I'm selling you this home, this is yesterday's case, so it's in yesterday's brisa. I'm selling you this home, almanas, on the condition, shediyuta ha'alyona sheli, that the upper story is mine. So the Gemara says, what's the halacha? Diyuta ha'alyona shalom. So the seller has the ability to retain it. So the Gemara says, va'amrina l'may hilchasa. Now again, remember, based on what they've established is that when you sell a home, what's included in the sale of the home? Anything above it and anything below it. So now remember again, we've also established one other principle, which is that there is no such thing as unnecessary or nonsensical transactional verbiage. So therefore, what did we do? We did something fascinating. If you say something in the context of a transaction that doesn't seem to be necessary, what do? We figure out a way to interpret it to make it necessary. So therefore, if I'm selling a home to Ruvain, I say, Ruvain, I'm selling you this home in the condition that the upper story is mine, rooftop is mine. So what does that mean? The rooftop, in other words, assuming that it is a rooftop with a fence of 10 tefachim, then what's the halacha? That rooftop is automatically excluded from the sale. So if it's automatically excluded from the sale, what is it exactly that I am saying transactionally? To which the Gemara says, so what are the ramifications of that statement, given the fact that under normal circumstances, such a rooftop would normally be excluded regardless? Rav Zvid Amar Shimratza Lahotzi Baziz. And suppose this was the top of yesterday's daf, the top of Amud Beis yesterday. So Rav Zvid said, it means that I reserve the right to extend beams from that rooftop going out. Rav Papa says, Shemratza livnos aliyah al gaba bona. Rav Papa says, now literally translated, if I want to build on top of it, I reserve the right to do so. Visadaitcha bistama lokani lamali alminas. And I will say, but again, once again, if we assume that the default is that the rooftop is carved out from the sale, then why do I need the almanas? Then why do I need any kind of conversation about this? To which the Gemara says, "Hanile almanas di'inofil hadir banile." So I'll say, so what does the almanas help with? The almanas helps with the following idea. We spoke about this in yesterday's daf. Normally, even if a rooftop is carved out, so let's say I go ahead and I sell a home to Ruvain, right? Home to Ruvain, and I happen to have a rooftop that has a fence around it that is 10 tefachim high. So what's the halacha? That rooftop is not included in the sale. Okay, let's say then the roof collapses. The roof collapses. I do not normally have the right to rebuild that roof. In other words, my rights in the roof are in that original roof as long as it exists. But technically speaking, once it collapses, my rights are done. However, if halacha l'maisa, I include what appears to be this unnecessary verbiage. So remember again, whenever you have what appears to be redundant or unnecessary verbiage in a transaction, we already go ahead and reinterpret that to make it transactionally relevant. So in this case, over I'm selling my home to Ruvain, and I say, Ruvain, I'm selling you my home, but I'm excluding the rooftop. The rooftop is already excluded because it's a rooftop that has a fence that is more than 10 tefachim high. So what exactly is it that is being included over here? So it's reserving the right that if the roof were to collapse, I reserve the right to go ahead and what? Rebuild it. Okay, so I'll say, so now let's take a moment to just look at the Rambam. So the Rambam writes in Hilchos Mechira, Perech Avdalid Halacha Tesvav. So the Rambam writes, in general, when you sell a home to someone, so what is included in the home is what we call umka veroma, that which is above the house and that which is below the house. That's the assumption. However, again, the Rambam writes, what if you want to sell a home and you dafka want to include the pits and the water cisterns and things like that? The Rambam writes, V'kevon shekasav lo mikarka hatahom va'ad rum harakia. If you write the lashon of mikarka hatahom, I'm selling you everything literally again to the depths of the earth. Ad rom harakia, to the heights of the heavens. Kana habar v'hados. So I'll say, so essentially, the Rambam says we paskin like Rav Dimi. Now, there's two things over here. Number one, you don't have to write in a transaction umka veroma. That's understood. That's whenever you sell a home, you're selling that which is above the house and that which is below the house. That's transactional, even if you don't write it. What's also understood, the default is that pits, water cistern, things like that are not included in the sale. However, if you want it included in the sale, you need that magic phrase, umka tahoma ad rom rakia. If you put in that phrase, then even the water cisterns or the pits are included. All right, beautiful. That's the end of that sugya. Says the Mishnah. So I'll say, so now, continuing, well, not really the end of the sugya. Continuing in the sugya, lo es habar v'lo es hados, afapi shekasav lo umka veroma. So I'll say, so this is exactly what we just said. So now I'm selling a house to Ruvain, and it happens to be on the property. Now I'll say I'm selling him a house, I'm also selling him a property. A chutzner, right? So let's say now included in that chutzner is a pit, is a water cistern. So what's the halacha? Generally, when I sell him the house, the pit and the water cisterns are not included in the sale. They're not included in the sale. Now, both say now, right? Even if I wrote umka veruma, this is interesting, right? I don't have to write umka veruma because it's understood. But even if I did write it, that's very nice. But it still doesn't include pits and water cisterns. Remember again, if you want to include pits and water cisterns, what's the magic phrase? Tahom ara ad rom rakia. That's the phrase you need. Absence of that phrase, halacha l'maisa again, you're not including the water pits or the cisterns. Okay, so we'll say, so now, here's what we've got. This is fascinating, right? So now, I'm going ahead, I've sold my home to Reuven, and again, based on the wording of the transaction, I have not sold him my bar and my dus. Right? My pit and my sisters. I haven't sold it to him. Great, so now it's mine. So we'll say, so this Rabbi Daniel Goff has mentioned this a couple of days ago, now here it is. Then we'll say, now here of course it's great. So I own the water pit and the cistern. What's the $1 million question? What's the $1 million question? How am I getting there? Right? How am I getting there? Because remember again, where is this bar? This bar is punked right in the middle of the chutzner that's now owned by Reuven. So now the shaila is, how am I accessing it? See, here we go. This is incredible. But tzarich likach lo derech de Rabbi Akiva. Akiva says, okay, you got to purchase a right of way. You got to, in other words, I sold everything to Reuven, and while it's true that I own the bar, I have to purchase from Reuven a right of way. The Chum say no. The Chum say no. I don't have to purchase anything. Why not? The assumption is I retained for myself a right of way. So I'll say this fascinating machlokas. Obviously, I'm not flying to my bar, right? And I need to walk there. So how am I getting it? Rabbi Akiva says, look, you need to buy back a right of way from Reuven. I have to buy back a right of way from Reuven. Chum say no. It's understood that I am retaining for myself a right of way. Umod Rabbi Akiva says, Bizman sha'amar lo chutz me'elu shein tzarech likach derech. So I'll say, listen to this. Rabbi Akiva understands, this is fascinating. What if, so again, this is so interesting because everything here is building on each other. So remember again, I sell a home to Reuven. Either I say to Reuven, me'umka veruma, or I don't say it. What am I selling to Reuven? What am I selling him? What I sell Reuven stam a house. What am I selling him? A house and below and above. What am I not selling him? A pit. Okay, so now I retain my bar. Rabbi Akiva says you retain your bar, but you have to purchase a right of way. But Rabbi Akiva would agree in the following case. What if I say to Reuven, I'm selling you my house. I'm selling you my house. Chutz min habar, with the exception ultimately of the bar. Now both saying that is an unnecessary, right? An unnecessary, really redundant statement because it's understood. Now remember, what do we say in halacha? Whenever you make an unnecessary, redundant statement, we interpret that to be transactionally relevant. So therefore, even Rabbi Akiva agrees that halacha l'maaseh, if I said, Reuven, I'm selling you my house, but I'm excluding the bar. I don't have to say that. The bar is automatically excluded. So Rabbi Akiva says, what is it that I'm actually doing in this transaction? In that case, it must be that I'm retaining the right of way. I'm retaining the right of way. That is the impact of that statement. I am excluding the right of way. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva, because again, otherwise the statement itself is irrelevant. If I say I'm selling you this house with the exception of my pit, because I already retain the pit, at the end of the day it must be that I'm retaining for myself the right of way. So the Gemara says, so it's very interesting. Now this is the reverse case. The reverse case is I'm holding on to my house. What am I selling? I'm selling my pit. So now I'm holding the house, I sell the pit to Reuven. So we'll say, so now what's the halacha when you sell the pit? So obviously Reuven becomes the proud owner of the pit. So we'll say, so now the shaila is, what does Reuven do regarding right of way? So Machron la'achar, Rabbi Akiva Omer, ino tzarech likach lo derech. This is fascinating. Rabbi Akiva understands that halacha l'maisa, included in the sale of the pit, is also what? A sale of the right of way. Access. Doesn't make sense to sell them without selling access. No. If Reuven wants right of way, wants access, he has to purchase right of way as well. Okay, so we're going to have to see what exactly is at the root of this particular machlokas. Okay, fine. I'll tell you right now. Now listen to this, so I won't make you wait. So there is a fundamental machlokas in terms of how sales work. Meaning, we've seen this before. Do we say mocher ba'ayin yafe mocher or mocher ba'ayin ra'a mocher? When someone sells something, do they sell it? Do they sell a kind of like Ayin yafa literally means with a good eye. Do we assume that the seller is generous in the scope of the sale, or that the seller is stingy in the scope of the sale? Now, it's not really fair to say it stingy. It's just, again, in other words, when someone sells property, are they selling it ba'ayin yafa in a generous way or in a non-generous way? It's not called stingy, a non-generous way. So Rabbi Akiva holds that mocher ba'ayin yafa mocher. When a seller sells something, he sells with complete generosity. So let me show you how that manifests itself. What that means is, if I'm selling my home to Ruvain, right? So in that case, I'm retaining the pits for myself because that's just the nature of transaction. But the assumption is I'm selling everything to Ruvain, and therefore, if I want a right of way, I have to buy it back. Conversely, if I'm selling a pit to Ruvain and keeping the house for myself, the assumption is that the sale of the pit comes with the right of way. Rabbi Akiva always assumes that any sale always takes place ba'ayin yafa, with generosity, with a good eye. On the other hand, the Chachamim hold that mocher ba'ayin ra'a mocher, that when someone sells property, they sell with a little bit of without generosity. In other words, it's just to frame it. When I sell something with the bare minimum that I'm obligated to include. So therefore, again, halacha l'maaseh, if I'm selling my house and I'm retaining the pit, of course I'm going to retain the right of way along with that. I'm not selling you the right of way. So, conversely, if I sell a pit, I'm selling you the pit. You want a right of way? That's going to be extra. That's going to be extra. So that's what we're going to see now. Again, I've kind of given you the Gemara's conclusion, but we're going to work through that. That's where we're going to get to. But that's the fundamental machlokes of Rabbi, which I will say, this is the fundamental machlokes that will spread out throughout many cases of sales. Again, it goes to the fundamental machlokes about the nature of how people transact sales. Are sales done with a sense of generosity that I'm going to give as much as I can in the course of the sale, or no? Sales are done with a little bit more of a limited way, ayin ra, which means I'll give you what I'm legally obligated to give you, but absolutely no more. That's the fundamental machlokes. Yosef Ravina, Vikakashile. So I'll say, so before we get into this, Ravina said, by the way, why is it that whenever we speak about the bar, right, we always speak about a bar and the dus? The Gemara says it's the same thing. They're both holes in the ground. Now the truth is, they're not exactly the same thing. The Gemara is asking, Yosef Ravina Vikakashile, Hainu bar, Hainu dus. In other words, okay, this is not the biggest cash in the world, right? But Lamaisa, a bar and the dus, they're kind of the same thing. So why the need to mention both? You're right. Both the bar and the dus are dug into the ground. So there is a difference. A bar is literally just a hole dug in the ground, versus the dus, I will say, which is the dus has a wall, right? The dus has a wall of bricks. So in other words, you dig down and then you cement the wall and it prevents the water from leaking out. Yosef Ravashi Ravashi similarly again had the same kasha. Hainu bar, hainu dus. Bar and dus are the same thing. Amali Mar Kashisha Braid Rav Chisla Ravashi Tashma Desanya Echad Dabar ve'Echad Adus Bekarka Ella Shabar Bechafira Badus Bebinyan. So as I say, they are dissimilar. Now, interestingly enough for both sides. So therefore, the Rashbam points out over here something very interesting. If you take a look at the last Rashbam on the page, Bebinyan Chofrin Bar Ba'afar Tichuach Ubonin Lo Kosel Avanim Umikri Dus. So essentially, just interesting, just an interesting Talmudic fact. A bar is just a hole dug in the ground. What is it used for? To go ahead and store water. Store water. What is a dus? A hole dug in the ground. What is it used for? To store water. What is there with the dus? A dus has a wall that is lined with bricks. So the nice part about a dus is that a dus prevents leakage. So essentially it's sealed. It's sealed. The walls are sealed. It prevents leakage. So look at the Rashbam. So he says, V'hilchach, last Rashbam on the page, V'hilchach, Itana bar, Havamina Hanimili bar shu b'chafira. Avadu shu binyan kein abayis. Haru b'chabayis. Well, see, now I understand why I need both. If the Mishnah would have just said that when you sell a house, you exclude the bar, I would have thought it's only a bar that's excluded. Why? Because a bar is not part of the house, it's dug into the ground. But a dus, which is much more of a structure, perhaps it is included in the sale of the home. Conversely, v'tana dus mishum debinyan b'fnei atzmoi. Or if it would have just said that a dus is excluded, I would have said, oh, a dus is excluded. Why? Because again, it's a real structure onto itself. But the bar, which is just a hole in the ground, it's not chashav, and therefore again it should be included with the sale of the home. Therefore the Gemara says you need to essentially you need to exclude both a bar and a dus. Okay, so it's just an interesting halachic fact over here. Okay, now we'll say we get into the meat of the sugya. So once again, we have a raging, and that is not hyperbolic. This is raging, a raging machlokes, an inferno of a machlokes. Feels like we need a little fire this morning, right? An inferno of a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim about the very nature about how sales work, right? So remember again, we have two cases. Case number one is I'm selling a home to Ruvain. So one thing we've already established is when I sell a house to Ruvain, what's not included? The bar and the dus. So therefore, again, I keep my bar, I keep my dus. The shaila is, how am I accessing it? Rabbi Akiva says, I need to buy back a right of way from the Chachamim. From Ruvain. Chachamim say, I don't have to buy back a right of way. It's understood that once I'm retaining my bar and my dus, I'm of course retaining right of way as well. Now again, I will say, it may have to be that I have to negotiate with Ruvain where that right of way is, right? In other words, if I can't decide to access it through his living room, right? So let me say again, where that right of way is going to be, how I'm going to access it, that'll be a discussion, but I absolutely retain a right of way. So this is our raging machlokes over here. So here we go. So my lab, so again, I gave it away. I gave away the conclusion a little bit already, but we're gonna work through it. So pretend like this isn't something new for you. So what are they arguing about? What is the machlokes? We'll say Amud Beis. Rabbi Akiva holds mocher ba'ayin yafa mocher, v'Rabbanan savri mocher ba'ayin ra'a mocher. Oh, okay. So I'll tell you what's the machlokes. The machlokes, we'll say, is how sales occur. Rabbi Akiva says mocher ba'ayin yafa mocher. Rabbi Akiva says that again, when you sell with generosity. In other words, I'm selling everything, and essentially retaining nothing for myself. Versus the Rabbanan say, mocher ba'ayin ra. Rabbanan say, once again, ba'ayin ra sounds so negative, but it's not negative. What it's saying is, when I sell the bare minimum that I'm obligated to include legally, and no more. Okay, the Gemara says, nami ba'al Rabbi Akiva latame damar mocher ba'ayin yafa mocher. So by the way, this is a famous shita of Rabbi Akiva, that Rabbi Akiva holds that in general mocher ba'ayin yafa mocher, that when you sell with generosity, and it could very well be that Rabbi Akiva's position is gleaned from our Mishnah, that this Mishnah is the very source for this position. Someone says, 1 second, how do you know that Rabbi Akiva's position comes from our Mishnah? Mimai, Dilma Rabbi Akiva Savra, in Adam Rosa, Sheyitain Ma'osav, V'yidrusu Achirim. So maybe Rabbi Akiva holds like this. Maybe Rabbi Akiva holds that halacha l'maisa, that when a person pays money, he doesn't want to pay money, and ultimately, again, someone else is going to traverse his property. For Rabbanan Savri, ein adam roz shito ma'ov v'yifrach ba'avir. And the Rabbanan, on the other hand, holds that a person doesn't want to have to go out and give his money and yet have to fly on the ground. In other words, maybe their particular issues are not whether or not ayin yaf or ayin ra, but something else. Take a look at the Rashba for just a moment. Mehacha. So look at the Rashba. I'm sorry, mimai. It's the last Y line of the Rashba. Tilma to the Kuli Alma Hasam ba'ayin yafa mocher. Maybe everyone agrees that mocher ba'ayin yafa, that when you sell, people sell with a sense of generosity and they want to throw in everything. Okay, and over here maybe there's a different issue going on. V'yesh lo karka inami ba'ayin ra ve'in lo v'acha pligi Rabbi Akiva savar ein lokeach rotze sheyitin damim lemocher v'yidros al gabe beso. So maybe there's something else happening over here. So maybe the issue is like this, that Rabbi Akiva, remember, now what does Rabbi Akiva say? I go ahead and I sell my house to Ruvain, right? So therefore I keep my bar. My bar does not come with an automatic right of passage. Now, why is that? Maybe Rabbi Akiva's issue is like this: that from Ruvain's perspective, if Ruvain's buying property, what doesn't Ruvain want? What doesn't he want? Other people walking on his property. That's it. In other words, maybe there's nothing to do with ayin yafa, ayin ra. This is just how sales work. If Ruvain's buying property, Ruvain does not. I will say, you know where this comes. This is not the same thing, but this comes up often, where a person buys a property, and let's say, unbeknownst to me, my front yard is the shortcut to shul. Right. Again, now that happens to be a different discussion because there's a difference between where the public is already using something. And I will say, but a person says, listen, that's not why I own a house. I want a property because I want privacy. I want privacy. So maybe Rabbi Akiva's logic is like this. When Ruvain buys property with the expectation that no one else is accessing his property. That's what it means to have private property. Right? So therefore, again, I still own the bar. All right, we're going to have to figure that out, but that's not automatic. Maybe that's what Rabbi Akiva holds. So let's finish. Rabbi Akiva Savar, Ein Rotze, we'll say first of the short lines in the Rashbam. Ein Lokeach Rotze Shitin Dam L'mocher V'yidros Agabe Bezo Leilech Lebar V'Ladoso U'mocher Nami Yodeh Shehu Sheladas Kein Kona Halokech Shel Yidros Mocher Al Gabe Bezo V'Lemocher L'Shayer Derech Liatzlo B'Ferish V'Ilchach Tzarech Likach Lo Derech. So we'll say so again. So maybe Rabbi Akiva holds that halacha l'maisa. When I sell property to Ruvain buys property with the expectation that no one else is traversing his property, and therefore, if I want to find a way to access my bar, okay, I'll have to negotiate that with Ruvain. So while it's true that I have ownership, access is not automatic. On the other hand, V'Rabbanan Savri, next Rashbam, L'drisa lo chayesh lo keach, de'ein kan chisar mamon, aval mocher yesh lo taina dein arotze sheikabel dmei beiso min al keach, amanash yisach v'roch la'avir. On the other hand, maybe the Rabbanan hold that so therefore again, Rabbi Akiva holds that when you sell property, right of passage is not automatically included. You have to purchase that back. On the other hand, the Rabbanan will say, no, if I retain a right to my pit, which is understood transactionally, how am I supposed to get to my pit? I can't just fly there, so it has to be understood that I retain access in order to be able to get there. So maybe it has nothing to do with ayin ra and ayin yafa, but maybe it just has to do with the fact that Rabbi Akiva holds that Ruvain's not going to want to buy property if someone else has automatic right of passage on it, because again, that undermines his use. The Rabbanan will say, but if I have my pit, then what good is my pit if I don't have the ability to access it? So of course I retain right of passage. Back to the Gemara. So Rabbi Akiva Savar Ein Adam Rotze Sheitim Osav Jesu Achirim. Rabbi Akiva holds Ruvain's not going to want to buy property if other people have access to it, because that undermines the function of private property. For Rabbanan Savrin, the Rabbanan holds Ein Adam Rotze Shita Ma'os V'Yifrach Ba'avir. The Rabbanan, on the other hand, hold that what good is it to retain something if the only way to get there is to fly there, right? Which is of course a bit sarcastic, right? What good is the pit if I don't have the ability to access it? I will say first wide line. So therefore, again, so remember, we're trying to figure out what is at the core of the machlokes of Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan. V'alam is seifa. So I'll say let's look at the last part of the Mishnah. Remember again, what was the Mishnah's case? The seifa was the reverse case. Instead of selling the home, I sell the bar. Right? I sell my bar to Ruvain. So v'alam is seifa. Machran li'acher. I sold my bar to Ruvain. Rabbi Akiva Omer eino tzarech likach lo derech. Rabbi Akiva says that halacha l'maisa, I don't have to. Right. I'm sorry. I sell my bar to Ruvain. Ruvain doesn't have to purchase a right of way. Rather, it's included in the sale. The Chum say tzarech. The Chum say you have to purchase a right of way. So we'll say, so what is this machlok? Is Dilma b'haik pligi? Perhaps we're arguing about the following idea. Rabbi Akiva savar basar daiter delokeach azlinon. V'Rabbanan savri basar daiter democha azlinon. So we'll say, maybe this is fascinating. Maybe their machlok is like this. We'll say, who gets to create the mindset for the transaction? Do we go after the mindset of the purchaser or after the mindset of the seller? Rabbi Akiva holds we go after the mindset of the purchaser. Therefore, when Ruvain is purchasing the pit, Ruvain assumes that what is included in the purchase price of the pit, what's included? Right of way, right? Versus the Chum who say that we go after the mindset ultimately of the seller. What does the seller say when he's selling a pit? What's included in the sale of the pit? What's included in the sale of the pit? Right? The pit, right? All other features must be purchased separately, right? So therefore, again, you want access, you want right of way, that's a separate transaction. Ve'ela meha. So we'll say rather, again, let's look at the following case. Ve'ela meha. Loas habar ve'loas hagat ve'loas hashovach. So we'll say, we'll see this later on in Mirat Hashem. We'll see this Mishnah in just a little bit. So watch this. When you go ahead, so if I sell a house to Ruvain, and again, the house is obviously situated on land, and the land has other features. For example, so I sell Ruvain a house. What's not included in the sale of the house? The bar, the gat. Gat is a wine press, a bar is our pit, right? Gat is a wine press. Shovach is the dovecote. None of these things are included in the sale of a house. Bein charivin, bein yeshuvin, whether they are functional or non-functional. V'tzarich likach lo derech divrei Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva says that halacha l'maaseh is very interesting. So now I sell my house to Ruvain, but on the property is also situated a pit, a wine press, a dovecote, whether they're functional or not functional, halacha l'maaseh, I retain ownership over it. Now Rabbi Akiva says, okay, so these items remain mine, but I must purchase right of way. The Rabbi Akiva, the Chum say, the Chum say, no, you don't have to purchase the right of way. So the Gemara says a very simple question: Ha su lamali? Why do I need this additional case? In other words, this is redundant. In other words, we'll say, at this point, by the time we get to this Mishnah and Ayin Aleph, we've already mentioned this 3 different times, right? We have twice in our Mishnah, and another time over here. In other words, I got it. Rabbi Akiva is going to say, you have to purchase a right of way, even though you retain something. The Chum say, you don't. Why is it necessary to repeat it? So here we go. Elalav hakamash malon. The Rabbi Akiva savar mocher ba'ayin yafa mocher, Rabbanan savar mocher ba'ayin ra'a mocher. So we'll say, it must see that the repetition is here to reinforce this idea that their machlokes is really a fundamental machlokes about the nature of transactions. That Rabbi Akiva says that when you sell something, the seller always sells with utmost generosity, which Rabbi means you're throwing in everything and retaining nothing for yourself. So therefore, again, when I sell Ruvain my home, as much as I retain my bar, my dus, my shovach, my gat, all of these items, I do not retain for myself a right of way, and therefore if I want it, I have to purchase it back separately. Versus the Chachamim who say, no, mocher ba'ayin ra'a mocher, which means that when you sell something, it's not that I'm stingy, it's that I'll sell what I'm strictly obligated to do so, and nothing else gets thrown in. And therefore anything else that is additional to the actual item has to be bought back, or has to be bought back in a separate transaction, to which the Gemara says, good. V'dilma ashmo'inon bayis v'kamashmalon soda. And here's what's interesting. If you notice, by the way, the first Mishnah, which is our Mishnah over here, is talking about a bayis, a home. The second Mishnah, which was the Mishnah we just mentioned, which talks about, again, the bar, the gat, the shovach, right, the pit, the dovecote, the wine press, that's a case of where I'm selling a field. Now here's what's interesting. It's the same thing, right? So again, when I sell a field, so what's not included in the field? The bar, the gat, the shovach. I sell a home. What's not included in the home? The bar, the dus. So I got it. In other words, when you sell a home, what are you selling? A home. And all the features. When you sell a field, what are you selling? The field and no other features. So why do I need both Mishnayos? The principle is the same. I'll tell you why. It's very interesting. V'dilma, I need both. Why? Diashmo bayis mishum debayis niusa. So you will say a home is different. Why? Because in a home, by definition, one wants privacy. Aval sada emalo. We'll say in general in a field, privacy is not a function that you're looking for in the purchase of the field. The ashmo inon sada, and if we would have just said the case of the sada, mishum the kashile davsha, because I will say in the field, this is an agricultural field, pedestrian traffic, someone walking across your field is detrimental. Aval bayis emalo, but in a house, pedestrian traffic is not really problematic. Elam is seifa. So I'll say rather again, once again, I will say, so again, we're just trying to figure out what is at the core of the machlokes Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanon. That is our fundamental shaila. So rather we'll say we come full circle. So first of all, take a look at the Rashbam just for a moment. The Yashmoinon Bayis. The Rashbam is right across from the Rabbeinu Gershom. The Rabbeinu Gershom is in the bottom left-hand column, left-hand margin. So you see where it says Rabbeinu Gershom. If you take your finger and you just move it rightward, you will get exactly to the Rashbam. The Yashmoinon Bayis, for the Yashmoinon Sada. So Hadimar just taught me a case of a home sale and not taught me the case of a Sada. Hava mina hasam huda am Rabbi Akiva tzarich likach lo derech. I would have said it's in the case of the house, where again, I sell the house and I retain the bar. That's the case where I have to purchase right of way. Why? Mishum tainos drisa, mishum tznius. Because we'll say in that case over there, it makes sense, according to Rabbi Akiva, that right of way is not automatically retained, because since Ruvain is living there, if I have right of way, that could compromise Ruvain's privacy. Kolomar the hasan v'adayesh lo tainos drisa, mishum da adam osa besoch beisomili ditzniusa, ve'ina rosa shidrusu achirim. In other words, if Ruvain's buying a house, right, presumably in a house, a person does private things. They need privacy, and therefore, again, Ruvain's not going to want me gallivanting, to my bar. Aval gabe sada modile l'rabbanan. Dein tzarich l'mocher likach lo derech lo mafsed lo keach midi b'drisaso shalzah beisadeu ta'lekat tzniusa. But maybe in the case of the field, Rabbi Akiva would agree that right of way is included. Why? Because in a field, one doesn't need privacy. One doesn't use a field like they use a home, and therefore, even Rabbi Akiva would agree that halacha l'maisa, right of way is included. Okay, fine. So the Gemara says, so back to the Gemara. Ve'ela miseifa. So we'll say, remember again, we have one simple question. What is at the root of the machlokes Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanon? And we have yet to be able to definitively articulate that. So we'll say we are 4 lines up from the bottom, Samech Daled on base 64b. Ela miseifa. Let's look back at the seifa. Machron la'acher. So we'll say, remember again, the seifa was the reverse case. I'm now I sold my bar. I sold my bar to Ruvain. So remember again, what's the halacha? What did the Mishnah say? Rabbi Akiva omer eino tzarech likach lo derech. Rabbi Akiva says Ruvain does not have to buy a right of way. Rather, again, included in Ruvain's purchase of the bar is a right of way. The Chum say tzarech. The Chum say no, he has to go ahead and purchase a right of way. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. Ha su lamali hainu hach. Why does the Mishnah feel compelled to mention this case? It's the same thing. In other words, fine, you reverse this. So in the beginning of the Mishnah, I was selling a home, and we talked about the idea that Reuven acquires the home. I retain the bar, but Rabbi Akiva says, but I have to purchase a right of way. The Chum say, no, the right of way is included. And then we have the Seifa. Instead of selling the home, I'm selling the bar. I sold the bar to Reuven. So Rabbi Akiva says, Reuven gets the bar and the right of way. And the Chum say, no, he has to purchase right of way separately. It's the same case. It's the same case. Why do you have to say it? So we'll say, here we go. Here it is. Hasulamli hanuhach elo lav ha kamash malan. So I'll say rather the repetition is to reinforce the principle that is being used here. And what is the principle? Rabbi Akiva savar mocher ba'ayin yofa mocher, v'Rabbanan savri mocher ba'ayin ra'a mocher shmamina. So we'll say at the end of the day, the principle being utilized here is the nature of transactions. Rabbi Akiva Silber will say, bottom line is, after all of this, the Gemara says that this is very interesting. What we'll say, the Gemara seems to understand that sometimes what the Gemara will do is the Gemara will repeat cases when it's trying to show you a common principle theme that runs through all of them. See, I will say, what's interesting is because if there's a principle, right? We always like rules, right? We always like rules. Why do we like rules in halacha? Why? Why do you like rules in halacha? Because once you have the rule, then I'm good. Then I just know how to apply the rule, right? If the rule is the rule, then it can be applied in all cases. What the Gemara is suggesting is something fascinating. There's a tremendous amount of repetition that's happening in this Mishnah and subsequent Mishnayos. Why the repetition? The beauty of the repetition is to reinforce the rule. So what is the rule? Or what is the principle? Principle is probably the better idea over here. So the principle I will say is the Machlokes Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim about the nature of transactions. Rabbi Akiva holds mocher ba'ayin yafa mocher. When you sell something with a complete sense of generosity, which means that what's included in the sale? Pretty much everything. Pretty much everything. What is the seller retaining for himself? Nothing. Chachamim say mocher ba'ayin yafa. No, when you sell the bare minimum that you are buying raw. You sell the bare minimum that you are obligated to sell. So what are you retaining for yourself as a seller? What are you retaining for yourself? What are you retaining? Anything you can. Anything you can. And therefore, again, the two cases where this comes up is I sell ruva in my house. We've already established that in the sale of a home, I retain the pit, right? So Rabbi Akiva says, okay, but you have to purchase a right of way for your pit. I have the pit, I have to purchase right of way. Why? Mocher ba'ayin yofa. Because when I sell, I'm selling everything. I have to buy back the right of way. Chacham say no. Since I know I'm retaining the pit, by definition, I retain the right of way as well. Mocher ba'ayin ra. I'm selling now my pit. Reverse case, I'm selling my pit. Rabbi Akiva says, of course, included in the sale of the pit is also what? Is also the sale of the right of way. It's included. It's included in that, right? Mocher ba'ayin yofa. When you sell something with a sense of generosity. So when I sell ruva in a pit, of course I'm including a right of way. The Chum say no. Mocher ba'ayin ra. And when I sell him something, I'm selling him the bare minimum. So I'm selling him a pit. Right of way, that's going to be extra. So we'll say fundamental machlokes. So we'll say I think it's just interesting to point out over here, just b'derach hashkafa, how Rabbi Akiva is the opinion that holds mocher ba'ayin yafa mocher. Rabbi Akiva says that when you sell with a good eye. I both say Rabbi Akiva's dominant trait, the trait that has sustained us throughout the ages, is an ayin yafa, is the ability, literally again, to see the good in every situation, right? As Rabbi Akiva is being executed in such a barbaric way by the Romans, right? What does Rabbi Akiva say? Rabbi Akiva says, my whole life I wondered, when will I be able to fulfill the mitzvah v'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha? When will I be able to love Hashem with all of my life? And now I'm given the opportunity to do so. In his execution, he sees the opportunity to go ahead and give of himself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Famous Gemara Maseches Makos, right where the Rabbanan are walking and they see the fox run out of the former site of the Holy of Holies, Kodesh Kadoshim. All of the Rabbanan begin to cry. Rabbi Akiva begins to laugh. Why does he begin to laugh? Because he sees, again, without going through the whole Gemara, he sees within that event that now we've hit rock bottom. Now that we've hit rock bottom, there's only one way to go, which is up. Rabbi Akiva is always the one who's able to maintain a positive disposition. At the age of 40, an ignorant shepherd who knows absolutely nothing, yet sees the water dripping on the rock and recognizes that if the water can make an impact on the rock, alachas kama v'kama, all the more so that Torah can make an impact on me. Rabbi Akiva is always the one who goes through life ba'ayin yafa, always with a positive, upbeat, optimistic disposition. And amazingly enough, Rabbi Akiva brings that hashkafa ultimately to halacha. That when you sell something, we assume, how does your sale take place? Ba'ayin yafa. That when you sell, you always sell with a generosity of spirit. So we'll stop over here for today. How we paskin Meretz Hashem, to be determined tomorrow. Shkoyach, everyone. All right, Chavran Zoom, have a great day, everyone.